Well, good evening, everybody, and welcome to yet another Inspirability Talk. I can't quite believe we're almost at the end of the year, and we were just talking backstage this evening about how quickly 2020 has gone. I think we all gave up wishing the year away because we weren't quite sure what the end would give us, but we're here, we've made it. And I'm really thrilled to be able to cap off what has been actually quite an incredible year for Airability with yet another first for us, another great talk from a guest who's had an amazing career in the military. But before I introduce our guest this evening, I just wanted to remind everybody why we're here. And it is to allow everybody to get connected to Airability, but to also raise money for Airability. We've got tough times ahead still. We've had a successful aviators ball, which I hope you all tuned into, and if you didn't, you can still catch up on the event. It was a 4-hour extravaganza of fundraising. It was our Children in Need equivalent, with a live broadcast and some really great entertainment. So do go onto our YouTube channel to watch that through if you missed it. And we've had some other great events this year. We've had the Armchair Air Show, and we've had some other events, physical events, right at the start of the year. So I'm pleased to say we're still here. Everybody is as motivated as ever, and we're very much looking forward to an optimistic 2021. But back to this evening. It's my pleasure to introduce our guest for this evening, Dan Lowes. Now, Dan has had a pretty incredible career in the Royal Air Force. Joining in 2004, so a 16-year career. He's left very recently to pursue a career in civil aviation. But before stepping out of his flying suit and going into a rather more roomy cockpit, Dan spent 4 years on the Typhoon Force on the front line, and then 3 years testing. So as a test pilot on the Typhoon. And then, of course, joined the Red Arrows. I'm sure some of you will recognise him or know his name from his stint on the Reds at Scampton. But he hung up his red flying suit, left the Royal Air Force, and has most recently been flying a Gulfstream 650 ER, which sounds to me like an aircraft with exceptionally long legs, for TAG Aviation. So, Dan, are you there?
Good evening, John. Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's a pleasure. It's good to see you, and really looking forward to this evening, Dan. We've got a lot to get through, and I'm thrilled that you've spared us the time. So I know you've got some commitments away from home coming up soon, haven't you? So thank you for that.
Oh, anytime. And just listening to the events that you guys have been doing to keep your charity on the map, and the hard work that goes into helping the people that you do is fantastic. So to be here and speak to you tonight is awesome.
Thank you. And you're part of the family, of course. You're part of the Airability story because the Red Arrows have had a really long association with Airability. In fact, it dates back to around about 2009, when the team came along to the Airability Aviators Ball, and so ever since, I think our relationship has got ever stronger. So you've I know been to the Aviators Ball and had some late nights like we all have.
Yeah, great events. Yeah, as you say, I think we're smirking because they're just awesome events, aren't they? It's one definitely on the social calendar for the team. I know. So it's a shame that although you couldn't be there in person this year, the fact that were able to put a 4-hour extravaganza, as you put it, online, and people were able to get, and I saw, was it in the 50s, nearly £60,000, if not more now, maybe. I mean, what an amazing achievement. So well done everyone for doing that. And it's something that it is a lot of fun, but it raises money for the people that need it.
Yeah, here. No, great words, Dan, for sure. Well, let's talk a little bit about yourself and your career, because it is a fascinating one. And I always have to apologise to our guests, Dan, and you're no different, because your entire career is about to get whisked beyond your eyes for the next hour. So hopefully you can look back and go, yeah, I did okay.
But fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed. I'm sure it'll be all right. Now, in 2004, that's where the journey started, I believe. And it's really interesting. I think for all of us, when we embark on a career, we leave school or university, what do we want to do? Some of us don't really have a clue. Some of us have had a dream since, the youngest days. Tell us about your story, into the RAF and how did it start?
Well, for me, I was born and grew up in Hong Kong. I was a son of an airline pilot. So, yeah, I was from day one, really, I was surrounded by aviation chat or, just again, being in Hong Kong, my school was very close to Kai Tak Airport. So the aircraft used to come in, honing in on the checkerboard before they jinked right onto that famous approach. But, they used to go around our sports ground. So you can imagine being at school with these 747s wrapping themselves almost around your high-rise school building, and the stories and the thoughts. And again, being in Hong Kong, we had the Wessex, the Royal Air Force had the Wessex out there at the time, but that was the only military presence. So again, I could just forge stories, and my imagination ran wild when I heard stories of RAF fighters or Chinook helicopters and all these sorts of things that it was to me just magical stories. I never saw them, and we used to come back in the summer, go to the odd air show, and there would be the Tornado, there would be the Harrier, the Jaguar, the Red Arrows, and you get back on your plane back to Hong Kong and not see them again for another year. So it just built something in my mind and something in my heart. So that's the way I want to go. Again, lucky, I guess, coming from a family that was already steeped in aviation. So it was natural to talk about it, natural to be able to believe in it. And that was it, really. When I was 13, I moved back to the UK to finish off, GCSEs and A levels, and I got an opportunity to join the Air Force right after A levels at 19, and that's the option I took over university. So lucky for me, it worked out, and that was it, really, through flying training and onto the Typhoon.
Yeah, and so obviously it's a fairly well understood journey, and we've had some guests in the past who've taken that journey, through into Cranwell and then been streamed into ultimately their flying career. How was it's really interesting, Dan, because there's mixed feelings about the time at IOT, because some people find it an absolute honor and a privilege, and get consumed by the history, and others just want to get out of that place as quickly as possible. So how was IOT for you?
Well, I think everything you just said is the daily cycle. I think you woke up in the morning motivated and trying to get out of the place in the evening. But no, it's I loved it. I loved officer training. For me, that was it. I was in a way. It's like, how on earth have I ended up at RAF Cranwell? Being trained to be an RAF officer to go on and hopefully be an RAF pilot. And so I did. Jokes, all those joking bits aside, I loved it. I'd moved to the UK at 18. I was now 2004, so 6 years later. So I was meeting people from part of the country that I'd never met before. So for me, which is quite strange, really. But for me to meet all different people from all sorts of backgrounds, all different parts of the country, all with the common goal of being commissioned as an officer into the Royal Air Force. So that was amazing. Again, we were getting put on buses and taken up to exercise in Otterburn. Parts of the country I'd never been to. I was getting laughed at almost like I felt in some ways like a foreigner, that I didn't know parts of our country. So that was exciting. I made friends for life. A friend I saw just a few days ago, we meet up every week on a Monday to go cycling, and he and I were 19 years old, and we met at the front gate, and that was it. And we've been friends ever since. And there's tens, if not hundreds, of stories like that with people you meet over your time in the Air Force. It's just an amazing organization and an awesome thing to be a part of.
Yeah, no, quite. And of course, it worked out for you, because we're here now talking about the career you had as a pilot. So you went through the training system successfully, and would have been streamed onto fast jet. So give us some perspective on the Hawk. This is as some air forces call it, the lead-in fighter training phase, the final phase of fast jet training. And there's been a couple of documentaries on the TV, fly on the wall documentaries, and to me, I can very easily see the pressure, and I can understand the level of expectation that, if you've got that far, you're probably putting the pressure on yourself. There's an expectation of, getting out there and performing every day. I mean, what was that like, particularly towards the end of the course?
It was tough, and you're doing stuff towards the end of the course that, there's a particular course, 19 Squadron was the essentially the tactical and weapons squadron. So you've already been taught to fly the Hawk for 4 to 6 months on what was 208 Squadron, and we moved on to 19 Squadron. And for the next 3-4 months, they taught you to fly the aircraft tactically. So more aggressive type flying. You'd be flying at a level as a pair, trying to hit targets on time, whilst another aircraft was trying to chase you down. You drop your first, albeit small, bits of concrete, but you dropped your first weapons. You know, the responsibility of flying an armed aircraft was huge. You got exposed to those options. In fact, that's graduating 208 squadron, just moving over to 19. And yeah, so the pressure was growing and growing and growing. And also you kind of get into this mentality. You get the pack mentality of you want to succeed, and you start to get, less and less people on the course if they haven't quite made it, and that becomes, you can turn up on a Monday and almost be done on a Friday. It could happen that quickly if you really had a bad run of luck. So, or skill fade and all those things if you didn't turn up prepared. So it was forever on your back that it might not happen for you. And you saw other guys who had been excellent the whole way through flying training start to suffer, and you started to get that imposter syndrome again. Well, if they're struggling, it's going to happen to me anytime soon. And it's actually something I talk about a lot now. If people talk to me about, you said successfully through flying training, and yes, I did. I ended up on the Typhoon. If you walk through the gates of RF Cranwell at 19 to be a pilot, and 4.5, 5 years later you're strapped to a Typhoon, if that's what you wanted to achieve, then yes, that is a successful way through flying training. But I failed a trip pretty much, if not two, on every flying training course I'd ever been on. And actually, I think for me personally, that was a good thing, because it made me dig in. No, it made me realize I wanted it as much as I thought I wanted it, and so I worked harder for it. So there were some people that maybe found the more basic elementary flying training bits quite easy, and they got themselves right to the end of the flying training system, where there's no two ways about it. It is difficult, especially with your experience and the tasks you're being given, and having maybe not failed previously. When they did come unstuck once or twice, maybe they found it a bit harder to pick themselves up. So it was a real interesting mix of emotion, ability, resilience. It was, when you look back, you probably learned some of the most lessons as an aviator that you're probably ever going to learn in your career on that squadron.
Quite. So it worked, and you're posted to the Typhoon. I mean, what was that like? I mean, how did it feel? And what's the Typhoon training like? I mean, I'm assuming a fair amount is in the simulator, given the fourth generation aircraft type you're in, and the synthetics around it nowadays. But nevertheless, what a machine!
Oh yeah, I still remember the phone call. Ringing my parents to tell them it out the back of the bar at the officers' mess, where we'd just been told at Valley where we were all going. And I was, I'm sure there'll be people watching this who will have a little doff of the cap. I was initially gutted that I didn't go to the Harrier, because that had been something I'd always wanted to fly. But fate is the hunter, and had I gone there, that hopefully I would have been successful in that type of training. But it wasn't long until that aircraft type folded, so it would have been back into the Typhoon anyway. So I was able to get to where I was initially, if I look back, luckily by going to the Typhoon or just being sent there straight away. But I mean, this thing was 2008, 2009, end of 2008, start 2009 when I got there. So really the aircraft type in the Air Force was brand new, and the power. I remember getting in it and just thinking, oh my goodness. Like, we did I think it's trip 3 or 4 at the time, was the performance takeoff, where about 130 knots, you slowly rotate to about 60 to 70 nose up, and you just play with the speed, and eventually obviously you have to give it a bit back. But I just remember going up, my brain was still on the runway. I couldn't work out. Had I been by myself, I don't know where I would have ended up. But and that was coming back for the first turn, and just being given responsibility of just such an amazing airplane, such power. You sat nearly 15 feet off the ground when you taxi around, so you feel like you're taxiing around in a throne. It was just awesome. And as you say, a lot in the sim. It's a 6 weeks ground school. Very well put together ground school, which incorporates a lot of emergency drills in the simulator, because eventually they're teaching you to be a single seat pilot. There were moments when you're sat in a situation where you just think, actually it'd be really nice just to say to your crewmate, what do you think about this? But you're being trained to the point where you have to make those decisions entirely by yourself all the time. So that's what the training's structured for. So a lot of emergency handling stuff to get you used to the aircraft, and to drill those kind of memory items into you. A bit of time in the sim, but at the time, 2008, 2009, there was actually a little bit less sim time, I think, compared to now. So we were very lucky. We did quite a lot of time in the 2-seat Typhoons, then into the single seat, and then onto the Frontline, which each squadron did have a 2-seat airplane, but most of your flying was just single seat. And what a way to learn, awesome.
Quite. And how immersive was the training on the ground in the sim?
Oh, it's yeah, second to none. It's fantastic, and they've designed the aircraft type, to do that. And I've been nowhere near the F-35 program, but I would imagine when you look at that, they don't have any two-seat airplanes. So the simulator design and the way in which they build the missions in the simulator, the realism of the graphics, or the or of the actual setup, the HMI, so the human machine interface of it, that's got to be on point, because if not, there's negative trading. So the domes were fantastic for all-round vision. You could set all 4 simulators up at Coningsby to fly with each other. There was aspirations before I left, they hadn't quite done it, but I think they have done now, where you can link it to other aircraft types in other parts of the world and all meet up in the same bit of airspace and fly a mission. So I mean, it is second to none. Second to, obviously, sorry, I take that back, it's second to flying an airplane. But in terms of exposure and realism, you can't knock it. It's invaluable.
Yeah, quite. And so you're through the operational conversion unit and then onto the front line. And I would assume that once you get to you've obviously learned how to fly the jet, you've learned how to operate it as a weapons platform, and now you go on to the frontline squadron. And then I guess the learning continues. It's a constant, sort of learning curve. But I mean, what is it like to be deemed combat ready, or whatever that qualification is, to allow you to actually fulfill that dream that you had, all those years ago in Hong Kong?
Oh yeah, it's hard to quantify such a feeling into words, really. But I can tell you, you join your squadron, having been on the OCU, and again, it's kind of the pack mentality, isn't it? You start as a junior course, and you're filling up the coffee machines when you're not flying, and taking the bins out and picking the sandwiches up for the mess, and then you kind of go up this little structure. By the end of it, you're doing the more advanced flying, and people leave you alone to concentrate on it a bit more. So you finish the squadron, or the OCU, as I say, feeling competent, but you just don't know what you don't know. And I remember I joined 3 Fighter Squadron on the southern side of Coningsby. I think it was mid to late 2009, maybe, late 2009. And it was during an exercise that just started. At the time, there was only 3 Squadron and 11 Squadron. There weren't any other squadrons. They were the 2 frontline squadrons. And we'd all just started up on this. It was called Exercise Double Diamond, a squadron run by 11 Squadron. And it was, 4 jets from each squadron with some American F-15s from Lakenheath against some simulated Red Air that would meet us over the North Sea. We'd all have a big fight. We'd go to the tanker, refuel, go again, and go home. And off we went. And I got given, even in the planning stage, I got given the lineup card, which was simply to put whose name was in what aircraft and what fuel state they were. And what should simply, by the time you're up and running, it takes you 2 minutes. It took me a full 45 minutes. There was people getting angry with me that I wasn't keeping up with them. That's when you realize you're with the big boys then, you might think you could fly the jet, but no, when you hit a squadron, it's like finishing, I would imagine, your A levels and going straight into your 3rd year of the of university. Do you know what I mean? These guys, they take you under the wing. Of course they do. They look after you, because what is amazing about the Air Force, and something subsequently now being outside you do miss, is the fact there is that brotherhood and that family feeling. They take you under the wing. They want you to be successful, but it's not an easy road. And I do remember landing off my first mission on my squadron, lying in bed and going, oh, they have got to have got this wrong. There is absolutely no way I'm supposed to be here. It's not going to happen. And that's how you start. And then 6 months later, you're getting airborne with 2, 4, 6 Typhoons, meeting up in the North Sea, as I say, doing some refueling that you can see on the screen there, doing simulated attacks, all the stuff, bringing the jets home in poor weather. And they put this combat ready patch on your shoulder, and that validation of success in your squadron's eyes is something that it's so hard to fathom, but you have this incredibly proud moment that everything you thought possible and you strove for, it's there, and it's there in about a 3-inch cotton patch on your left arm, but it's just the best feeling.
Yeah, I'm sure. And in terms of the job that you had, Dan, on the squadron, I mean, probably quite a loaded question there, but ultimately, as a frontline pilot in the Royal Air Force flying the Typhoon, what was your job?
Your job, well, it depends what squadron you're on, but most of my time, your job on there was to be proficient, if not excellent, in air-to-air combat. That then moved on to air-to-surface combat as the jet got more advanced in my time on it. So you become a multi-role pilot. So you should be able to get airborne, fight your way into an area through an aerial type scenario, hit a ground target successfully, and fight your way out if you needed to. That was what you were paid to do. That was it. That's bread and butter. And to be excellent in all those operations. And you should be able to take off and the mission change to a complete aerial battle, or you could get airborne and there might not be any enemy fighters. You go straight to target, and you should be able to react to that. Alongside of that, constantly was being able to conduct quick reaction alerts. So whether that be in the south of the UK or further north, you were there to provide a service to make sure the integrity of the UK airspace was kept. Whether that be from potential terrorist threats, we've seen obviously that's been a huge factor in our lifetimes elsewhere. It's a very real threat. So we're there to stop that hopefully from happening, or to guarding our skies, through to intercepting other forces, nations who came close by to our airspace, albeit they would always stay in international airspace, it must be said. And just to make sure that the integrity of our airspace was kept. And that was primarily our role in the UK. In fact, that was really the role of the Typhoon.
Yeah. Now, I suppose a lot of us are familiar with QRA because we hear it. It's once a quarter there's something in the news, isn't there, about an intercept? I mean, what's that like? And I guess, Dan, how does it work? So you're, I guess, on duty or on shift, on a QRA period of time. So where would you be on the squadron, or would you be elsewhere? And then what happens when the bell goes? I mean, just give us some perspective.
Yeah, you'll be situated in a certain part of the airfield, so away from the squadron. So it's a completely separate job. So it will have dedicated ground support, dedicated pilots for a duty period, and you would spend that period on high alert. But that would be in kit. If people are interested, if you want to go, BFBS do some great videos on where Typhoon is deployed and set up quick reaction around the world, and there's some great insight to how the guys do it. So I encourage people, if they are interested, to seek it out after. But you would be sat very close to the aircraft, ready to go, and that's it. You keep yourself busy. You can still operate like you would on a squadron in terms of other duties that you might be doing outside of flying, and then that's it. You're just waiting for it. Now, that could happen in a series of ways. There could be something happening in the background that you're not aware of, but the intelligence services are, or air traffic control are. So that might start feeding into the overall picture that we call it of what's happening. So you start to build some understanding that it might be a situation or a scenario beginning to form. So at that point, you'd probably start rechecking the weathers, making sure your laces are done up because you've been in there for a fair few hours and you try to make yourself comfortable. All those little things that just all add up to being ready to go at the end. But that's one side. What could happen is no notice. Just like you see your emergency services in the UK react to. There's something that they don't know it's happening. That's it. The call comes in. Now, for guys on quick reaction, that will come through with some type of scramble message, quite akin to the World War II videos that you see, the Spitfires and the Hurricanes, where there was the scramble, and with a couple of details on there to tell you where to go. And that'd be it. Now, that is when your heart's racing, because you will fly out the door as fast as your little legs can take you. Your jet's already pretty much set up, ready to go. So it's in a state that means that the aircraft can be started much quicker than you would normally start it on the squadron line, because you've obviously prepped it for that specific role. And you run up, and if you see the videos, you see the guys running up the stairs and bending into the cockpit before coming out, and that's them starting the APU and trying to get the aircraft fired up as they're still pretty much on top of the stairs, getting their jacket and their helmet on. Yeah. And away you go. I say fortunate, because you to get scrambled, and I don't want to sound like we were always there going, right, we want something bad to happen so we can get involved, but it's nice to be able to action what you've been trained to do. So I was very lucky. I got scrambled against a couple of Russian bears a number of times, a couple of airliners not speaking to people, and your heart's racing, because when you're running down the runway, not long ago you were sat in an armchair, your brain in another space completely. Yeah. And now it's 3 o'clock in the morning, for example, when you've just woken up. And in fact, I will tell a little story, but was about 2-3 o'clock in the morning. We got scrambled, and as we went out, the engineers were, bless them, because it would happen so fast. They hadn't quite got changed, so there was a half-naked man marshalling me out of an aircraft shelter. You take off, yeah, exactly, and his ear defenders and his high vis vest. But it's about 3-4 o'clock in the morning, and you've been airborne about 5-6 minutes, and you think, oh, have I just? You're starting, yeah. You're at the point you think, have I just made this all up? Like, am I going to have to turn around and apologise that an airplane's just taken off for no reason, and then the radio crackles and you're on a shout and it's all good. But yeah, it's that kind of element of surprise almost to yourself. Yeah. You'd be asleep and airborne in minutes. So
yeah, and we've seen the footage. Clearly, when there's two aviators in the air, regardless of their background or their political beliefs, the difference is perhaps sometimes left on the ground. I mean, have you ever had the occasion where you've passed a wave or some other gesture? I know there's SOPs you have to follow.
Yeah. It's, do you know what? I've been very lucky. I intercepted 10, so five pairs of Russian bombers in my time, and it is relatively. You turn up. It's tense when you turn up because it clearly is, because there's a foreign military airplane and you're with yours, and it's fairly close to home. But you pull up alongside these airplanes and have a look, and there's quite solemn faces looking out the front for first maybe hour or two. You'll be alongside with these things up to, I think the longest time I did was about 8 hours next to one of them. All around. Yeah, they come down and they'll fly around. They head over to other people's airspace, come back again, go back again, and they're just doing what they need to do. And you'll be sat there with the tanker. When I first first couple of intercepts with VC-10s, and then the Voyager now. But you'll go sit with the tanker and go back. And normally after about 2-3 hours, everything kind of not loosens up in terms of professionalism of flying and being in the sky and getting the job done. But you might get the odd wave, or there might be someone they've almost got like a rear. Well, they have essentially a rear gunner, so you can pull right up behind these bombers in line of stern. And there'll be a little chap in his big jumper with his gloves, and he'll give you a little wave, and you give him a little wave back. They've been sent down for a job. They haven't woken up in their homes and said, let's go and do this job in an aggressive fashion. They've been sent there to do a job, and they're serving their country, and we're serving our country, and we're saying, look, this is the limit that you can take your job to. And it sounds aggressive, and it can sound too aggressive if you use the wrong language. I mean, it's clearly a threat that you have to take seriously, but in terms of the crews, especially when they leave, they give you a little wing waggle. I've had a few wing waggles of these bombers as they've disappeared back up the northern Cape of Europe. And you just think, actually, do you know what? We're just both doing a job.
Yeah. No, it's fascinating, Dan. Yeah. So you were able to cash in on all that frontline experience and move into that next tour, which was your test flying tour. So how did that come about?
Yeah, in fact, I just if you don't mind, just correct at the start. You said as a test pilot. I was never a test pilot. I was an evaluator pilot on the test squadron. So
right.
I was fortunate enough at the end of what's essentially a long tour. I was at the time I just joined number 1. I'd been on 6 Squadron, so I went 3 Squadron 6, and then I just started with number 1 Fighter Squadron, who had just reformed at Lucas, and I'd done about 6-7 months with them when I got the amazing news for me that I'd been selected for the Qualified Weapons Instructor course, which is the QI course, if people have heard that. And that is hosted on the OCU. It's 7 months of dedicated training. There's 3 to 4 people a year get selected for it. So in my eyes, it was a real honor to be nominated for it and be successful in selection for it. And that was it. So we did 7 months on the squadron there, doing all sorts of stuff. I mean, amazing missions. Some of them were conducted over in North America. We were allowed to join a squadron on red flag. Back in the UK, that's because they're trying to get you to a point where you're almost a subject matter expert on, well, definitely the weapon system, but most systems on the airplane itself. The amount of resource and assets that are just thrown at 4 pilots on a dedicated course of 7 months. You come out of that course probably the best you could ever be on the Typhoon, in my opinion. Obviously, experience and airmanship aside, but in terms of just dedicated knowledge, dedicated training, you're on point. and you go after your squadrons. I keep bringing it back to this, but I think it's important. I wanted to go back to a frontline squadron as a weapon instructor, but I was sent to the test squadron, which I was heavily disappointed about. I was just thinking, we just spent 7 months being taught to almost eat glass. I want to be out there tomorrow. I want my nose cone to be the first nose cone that trips into someone's FIR on night one, and we're off to do the job. And that's never going to happen on the test squadron. I was quite disappointed. So anyway, I went over there, and another lesson in life, I probably made my frustrations known and got brought forward to the boss's office, and he told me, he was like, if you don't like this job after 18 months, I'll get you on the front line. And needless to say, I did a full 3-year tour with that squadron. I loved every minute. And it was a really exciting time. So we talk about the test pilot side. So there was 2 sides to this squadron. At the time, there was actually 2 flights, Tornado and Typhoon, both doing the same job. But on the Typhoon side, you'd have the test pilot. They take new weapons or take new software in the aircraft or new techniques in order to fly certain tactics, certain type of missile defense maneuvers. And they'd go out with certain fuel weights and fuel tanks, different centers of gravity on the airplane. And once it had all clearly been cleared through the computers, then the test pilots would bravely go and fly these missions and see if the aircraft was safe enough to be flown in that configuration and all the rest of it. And so we'd wait for that to happen. And then there was myself and a few other guys were evaluator pilots from dedicated backgrounds. So I was the weapons instructor, so mainly operating in the weapons area of the squadron. So at the time it was the Paveway 4 was coming from the Tornado. They were building up to the dual mode Brimstone, which they've now got. There was Storm Shadow, another weapon. So basically weapons that were coming off the Tornado as it was being brought out of service were having to be brought onto the Typhoon in order to keep that capability in the Air Force. So once it was cleared for flight, I had probably one of the best jobs in my eyes in the Air Force for 3 years. We spent a lot of time up in the Mojave Desert in California, based out of China Lake, and we just take weapons and a bunch of scientists and go blow things up and say, that worked like that didn't work like that. Can I suggest if you want to fly that type of mission, if you're going to go in with these many bombs, this is probably the way you want to be thinking about doing it. If you're going against this threat, maybe you want to use this. Or we'd go and we'd shoot down big drones over the Irish Sea, really, but just west of Anglesey. We'd go and shoot down these huge UAV drones and just have a look at, were our missiles effective at hitting targets? Could they be distracted by decoys and all the rest of it? And it was amazing. I just spent 3 years doing what you can see on the screen there, flying low level and blowing things up, and it was just awesome.
And I guess in terms of job satisfaction, to know that the efforts that you've made on the test squadron have ultimately, turned into new tactics and techniques and procedures for those guys and girls that will follow. I mean, it must be it's pioneering stuff, really, isn't it? It's a new territory for the jet, and setting up other people up for the future.
I feel incredibly satisfied with my time on the airplane and what I achieved. If I look back, I can't imagine there's a Typhoon pilot who hasn't deployed on an operation. When I first joined the Typhoon force, the Harrier and the Tornado were in Afghanistan. We were watching our best mates go and do a job, and so they'd come back and talk about these amazing missions they'd been on, and you had nothing. And then then the Typhoon. I was up in Scotland. They went away. Their first operations were out in Libya. Squadron didn't go, so now there was Typhoon guys telling me about these great wartime dits, and I had nothing. And then, as I say, finished this weapons instructor course, like, this is my time. I'm finally going to go and have some type of story that I finally did my job other than intercept airplanes around the UK. And I got sent to the test squadron. I was like, okay, fine. Well, it frustrated me for a long time that I didn't deploy. I mean, I did 16 years and didn't deploy on an operational mission. It's quite hard to stomach it a long time. And it took me quite a long time to process that as it not being a disappointing career. But when I look at what we achieved, it was the first time really on 41 Squadron when I was doing those missions, and we were writing these, as you say, TTPs and these suggestions for tactics and feeding them directly into Stanaval back at the Typhoon Force, who own standards and evaluation is what it stands for, and that was feeding directly into the documentation of these are my friends now who are going to go with their operational squadrons and use these weapons. Or when you're sat there with the designers of the airplane saying, no, don't do that. If you can, change it to do this, because when the guy's in trouble or when the guy's working hard, that's going to be the difference between a successful hit or a miss or something's not going to go right for pilot there. And actually, after 3 years, you realize that the airplane where it is now and the stuff it does, I'm very proud to say I had a say on how some of that came about.
Yeah, quite. And of course, still happening today. So it's a legacy. Yeah. Right. Do you get itchy feet, or someone says to you, "Why don't you go up to Scampton? It's sunny up there." So what happened, Dan? Tell us the story. Was this some sort of childhood niggling thing in your mind, or was it something that you hadn't really thought of, your next career move?
Oh no, for me it was a childhood thing. 100% a childhood thing. Again, as I talked about those summers coming back to visit UK-based family and seeing the Reds fly by, and it was even just a few weeks ago, I was out and a red arrow flashed by, and you can't help but look at a red jet flight. I can't anyway, and feel ultimately proud, get goosebumps, all the rest of it. Even having been a part of it, you see them fly by now, and you think, wow, isn't that awesome? So yeah, that happened as a small child, and you join the Air Force, and it's almost like taboo to talk to anyone that you would ever think about wanting to be a red arrow. So you just keep it quiet, keep it to yourself. No one wants to hear about it. And then eventually you get to the point. In fact, when I was on 3 Squadron, I mentioned before, the Reds came and did a practice display at Coningsby. And flying training, you don't even want to consider the Reds, because how dare you? If you can pass your next trip, you're good enough just to go one step further, let alone dream of being with walking in their shoes. So in fact, I flew with Monty. It was Lingy and Monty with a synchro pair, actually, and a few of us were invited up to Scampton to then be flown down to Coningsby for this practice display, and that was it. Just there's one thing watching the team, there's one thing being allowed to be in a brief or a debrief, there's another thing flying with them, and when you hear them shouting at each other, talking to each other, the way in which they were, how fast they're rolling the airplane, and that was it. After that, I thought, right, that is where I want to go. That's the mark I want to hold myself to eventually one day. And you need 1,500 hours flying time, which can take a while to get in the fast jet world. You do have to be above average, which if you haven't been of a certain qualification, let's say as a QFI of an A2, I believe it is. If you haven't been a QFI, you've just been a line pilot essentially. You have to become a force leader, which does take a long time because you have to become a good enough wingman to be a pairs leader. You have to be a good enough pairs leader to be seen to be a force leader. So a force leader, or in charge of a formation of 4 frontline jets, is a huge thing to achieve, and it's a big honor. It's not something they just throw around. So you have to achieve those things first before you can even, in that one bracket per year, write back to the signal that goes out saying, "Hey, this is me. Could I be considered for selection?" Anyway, I eventually ticked those boxes, luckily, and I applied. Like anything, not an easy road, and we can talk about the selection process as such. But it took me 3 attempts to get in. It wasn't something I just turned up and got into. It's something that I needed to be exposed to, have failed at, realize where I failed, and make a decision. Is this really what you want to do? And go back again. Failed again. It's like, is this really what it is? 100% what I want to do. 3rd time lucky, and I'm so glad I made that decision to keep knocking on the door.
Yeah. Well, wonderful. And you then obviously had to make the move, did you? Or were you living in Lincolnshire already? Or
yeah, I was lucky. I was living in Lincolnshire. Yeah, in fact, living in Lincoln. So it was great. My commute went from 45 minutes to 8. So it's fantastic. I mean, that's not 100% why I joined the team, but it was a factor.
So, I mean, the Red Arrows, Channel 5 are obviously huge fans of the Red Arrows, because I think for the last 10 years or so, we've seen the team on our screens, which is brilliant. And I've noticed that the documentaries have sort of transitioned from what it's like to watch the team and have a couple of interviews about flying to actually what goes on behind the scenes. And some of our viewers will have been fortunate to listen to Perty and also to Gary Waterfall about their time on the Red. But clearly the flying is why you join. I would imagine. And how was those first few months when you joined the team? I mean, did your head go back to that time at Valley where every trip mattered, and this is a whole new world. Can I do it? I mean, how did the training take place, Dan?
Yeah, they've been around for 57 years. They know how to train pilots to do that job. It's a very structured program that is built with a building block approach to it. So you're allowed to fail in areas, obviously not consistently, because if you consistently fail, then that's not an acceptable place to be. But you're given the room to fail. But you're worked hard. You'll fly 3 times a day, 5 days a week. You get an hour or so between flights. It's tough work. By Wednesday, you're going to bed early just to get enough energy to finish the week out. Well, I was anyway. I'm not going to speak for everyone, but I certainly was. And yeah, you first off, you first join before the end of the previous season. So again, you're walking around with guys already in their red suits. They've already earned the right to be there, and they've achieved it. So when you're listening to these debrief points from people, you've already seen them do the job. And I think that's really important, because straight away there's that level of respect. I think if you were in that room anyway, you're that kind of person who would be, I would like to say, receptive to debrief points. You're respectful of the position you are, the institution you've joined. But it does make a difference when you've seen the guys do the job, and they've seen it, they've done it all around the world. When they're telling you you're a bit wide, you're a bit long, you're a bit behind it, you haven't put enough power in at the right time. Sometimes you sit there and go, I don't understand. I swear I had full power, and I swear I went earlier. I swear I was on time. And it's funny because you look back at videos months before where you currently might be in that training system and go, oh, actually, no, I was awful. I was miles behind it. And he did tell me, and yeah, it is tough. It is tough. But as I say, you're given the room to fail, and you're given the support to succeed all at the same time. And I think that's the magic right there that gets the guys up to a world-class level in 7 months.
Yeah. And we've seen the pictures here of what it all means, and timing, I suppose, for you was just brilliant. The North America tour and that brought just going out the cockpit and just looking at some of those things that perhaps you need to essentially be trained for, maybe to consider is things like representing UK PLC. And representing the Royal Air Force. I mean, give us some perspectives on that, Dan, particularly on the North American tour, but more widely. You've got the pressures of flying in the team, which is absolute, and that's the priority. But it all comes with this big baggage as well.
It does. It's funny now that when I was in there, I don't think the guys. I never really found it baggage, and I know you didn't. It's not a negative word to use. It's just something that I think you accept is going to come with the job. Andy Morton, who's the PR manager there, he does an excellent job. He'll take young guys, and especially people like me, he'll round the rough edges. With maybe go with this angle, or maybe you should say that. But when you think actually the PR team's only got 2 people, really. Everyone dives in, but it's 2 people there sometimes with a holding officer thrown in just to keep the thing afloat. They're doing an incredible job, and I joined just as the team were coming back from that awesome tour to China. I'm sure a lot of people saw that, and that was incredibly successful. I mean, you can, depending on what you want to quantify it for, investment in UK business. It was the numbers were huge. Twitter hits of who the Red Arrows were, which meant, well, they must be from the UK, so who are the UK? All part of the great campaign. All feeds in, and off the back of that, there was a huge understanding then from, well, for example, the tour to the United States was all for the Department of International Trade. So there was all these big departments now who could see the leverage they had of the soft power approach of the Red Arrows and what they can do. And as a pilot, clearly it's important to look immaculate, because you never get a second chance to make a first impression. And when you step out of your jet in Kuwait, Pakistan, I think they're in, it's just outside Macau now. Sorry, I wasn't on the China tour, but where they stopped off in China, or you getting out in, you're walking downtown New York to do a ground engagement. That's when they look at you, that they're looking essentially at Great Britain, and that's not trying to elevate positions, but that's the kind of circles you're at. You're talking to governors and head of businesses, and you're in those rooms. So you look immaculate. You hold your own in terms of conversation, and you are an ambassador for the team, for the Air Force, for the Armed Forces, and for the country. So that plays also into the selection process. Can you? It sounds awful, but yeah, can you, having not had a drink in 6 weeks because you're in the Middle East and you get invited to the governor's house and there's a gin and tonic on the table, are you the one that's gonna, are you the grenade in the room? Because it just can't happen. It would be, you can't even imagine that happening. But so it's being able to do that on the ground and then instantly. For example, RIAT is a good example. I think a lot of your viewers might be involved with. RIAT's always a difficult one for the team. A weekend that everyone loves, I have to say, but it is a difficult one because there's not a lot of room there to find a quiet space to get into the position to execute. So you'll go from in the morning, you'll go meet a bunch of people in maybe some of the different chalets, or you go and do a signing session, which is immensely important because you'll meet people there. You might meet 10 people who just want a squiggle on a poster, but one of those 10 people, it might change their life that they spoke to you. So that's incredibly important that always happens. And then you go from there, and then you'll go through a crowd, and it is an amazing feeling. There's no two ways about it. When people stop you and ask for a picture and all the rest of that is awesome. But you're trying to get to a brief to then go and fly a display. So that's the bit where it can rub slightly. But that's part and parcel of the job. And the guys do a great job of being able to switch from 1 to 2 relatively seamlessly and executing a world-class performance, having spent 2 hours of their morning meeting people and answering all sorts of questions. Can I actually? I've got this because I spoke to Andy Morton actually before, because I'm not in the Reds anymore. I'm not even in the Air Force anymore. So just to big up the guys really and the team. And I've got a few facts for that America tour. We talk about outside flying. I'll talk about flight first, but it's something like 30 displays. 35 past 21 displays. But this is what we talk about when we talk about supporting the Great Campaign and putting the UK on the map. You can put 9 jets over a capital city. Or New York with red, white, and blue. And that's awesome, of the United Kingdom. But it was 2 billion people reached via all different channels, 130 million Twitter impressions, 126 ground events, 5,000 young people engaged through STEM events, 10 podcast episodes. Obviously, the Channel 5 guys are following us around. So, that's all that without touching an airplane almost, and that's the power of what happens outside the cockpit. It's amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've heard it said that you're the individual that's wearing the red suit. It's not your red suit's remembered, but not necessarily the name. Would you be recognised by 99% of those that saw you the weekend prior? It's a funny world, isn't it? It must feel strange.
Again, another story with that, because you get asked that all the time, and genuinely, you ask the guys in the team, and I'm always going to big them up because I love the guys that I flew with and worked with, and I love anyone who has ever been a part of that organisation and what they do. But because they tend to be of the same mindset, and people love it when you're in the jet. People in that team, or I should say the pilots, but the engineers, people in that team love it when they're doing the job. That's when they love it. The other stuff goes with it is incredible, but it's not about. I've never seen a guy in the team think, "Oh, this is awesome. This is the bit I love because this is where I get to meet people. This is where people recognise me." It's about taxiing out and a bit of banter on the radio. It's about running into a show and hearing number 2 big the team up just before you start to go. That's what it's all about, really. And in fact, we landed at Farnborough once and we stayed at a hotel quite close by. And I guess because this hotel was attached to the side of the airport, people must have known we were staying there. There was like 6 people were waiting outside the door of the hotel to get a couple of signatures. We arrived like, oh, look at this. This is, we've made it. 6 people have turned up to the hotel, but we'd been late, and someone said, right, downstairs in 10 minutes, because we same bus back out to the restaurant for dinner. So we all, signed these little posters, ran in, got our keys, ran upstairs, got changed, came back out. The same 6 people stood there. We walked out 10 minutes later, shirt and jeans. They just they ushers it out the way in case they missed the red arrows walking out behind us. So, okay. See you later.
What a story. And of course this is all happening, the operational side and then the soft side, and then of course there's your families, who meanwhile the shopping has to be done, the kids have to be taken to school, there's birthdays and weddings, and that must be a hard compromise. And did the families ever get the opportunity to come along for the ride on some of the weekends? And how does all that fit in?
Yeah, that is hard. That is hard, and I think I joined the team single, so it was a selfless decision on my behalf that I would just look after myself, standard, and go for it. So I can imagine if you are married and you have a kid or two, it must be a very difficult decision, because if it's anything like me, a childhood dream that might never be realized. So you're getting on with the rest of your life. You've married the lady that you love. You've started a family, because that's, you tend to be late 20s, early 30s to make those grades that I mentioned before. The amount of times you spent flying, the above average grading, just to be in the bracket, to be selected. You're late 20s, early 30s, which for a lot of people is the time that they naturally want to get married, naturally want to start families. So that must be a huge decision for people. I can imagine for people at home, not only the perceived danger of the job. I mean, flying itself is inherently dangerous. So now you've got 9 aircraft doing formation aerobatics. That is managed, as I mentioned, through flying training. So the perception of it being more dangerous is there, but in many ways it's not. And so there's that must be a worry playing on people at home. As I say, you fly 15 times a week, so you're committed in terms of time to the squadron. Well, I would say some of the guys did say through the winter months, obviously you can't do formation aerobatics in the dark, so you get a bit more time in the winter. In the winter months, you're going home at, if you can get your duties done outside of flying, you're going home at 4 or 5 o'clock maybe, so you can spend your evenings with your families, and you have the weekends in the summer. But the guys will fly out to Greece for 6 weeks just after Easter, and they'll come back, and then essentially from the 1st of May to September, October, apart from a week in the middle, that's it. Your working week is Wednesday to Sunday. So you lose your weekends here. I've had friends I've met since going, oh, finally we can speak to you again, all that kind of stuff, and you think you don't realize the impact, I don't think, that you have when you're friends and family, because you're constantly going, you don't realize how much you are actually away. And yes, it is disappointing to say, I'm sorry, I can't make your wedding, but I must admit, for me, it was like, yeah, but that's because I'm flying at Riyadh. How cool is that? For me, it was what was rewarding, and all the rest of it. That was probably quite a selfish way to look at things, but it takes a lot of your time. So you're away already for that 6 weeks every year, just after Easter. You're away every weekend in summer without fail for 4, sometimes 5 months, and in my 3 years with the team, we did at the end of the season. So you've already done that summer. We went away for 6 weeks to the Middle East, where the families unfortunately weren't able to. In fact, I do tell a lie. We did the first show in Athens, so the families flew out to Athens, which was great. They all paid to jump on a British Airways flight, so that was fantastic, because they came to see a show abroad and stay in the hotel, and you could have a meal, and that's lovely. And then they go back, and you disappear for 5-6 weeks. But do you know what? It's difficult in some ways. Again, 3 months in North America. All the girls came out for the final show, but you're still away for 3 months. There's a chap in the team at the moment, squadron leader Steve Morris, who had just had twins, and I want to say they're maybe 2-3 weeks old, possibly a bit older, but they can't have been much older when we went away for 3 months. Chris Linden Smith in our first year, he had his twins just as we disappeared his boy initially in 2017, just before we disappeared for 6 weeks. And you're going away and you're coming back, and your kids they're forming personalities, or it might be their first steps, and you do miss that, and it is hard on the guys, and you can see it, and you have to manage that, and it must be difficult for the team leaders and the bosses to pick up who they need to manage on with that kind of stuff. But it's a huge commitment. But I mean, I hope hopefully you can hear just in the tone of my voice, one that is incredibly rewarding. And as a pilot, to do that kind of raw flying. I mean, look at those pictures there. To be sat next to red jets, low level through the United Kingdom on a beautiful Sunday racing home. I mean, it doesn't get better than that.
No, and life is full of compromises, isn't it? And I think that's really, really well put. And now give us a little bit of an insight into what Channel 5 couldn't show or didn't say. And I know I've heard about.
There's not a lot of me, and that wasn't because I wasn't in front of the camera ever. I think it's I just ended up in some awkward situations. Here's the thing. You're under pressure the whole time. There's no two ways about it, because you're under a certain personal pressure, not to let yourself down, but not to let your team down. I certainly flew as my first, pretty much the first, if not all of my first season, not actually really worrying about me or whatever, just thinking, oh, don't be the one who has a shocker today, So you put yourself under a lot of pressure. Then there's a lot of pressure on the team to perform. And there's when you walk into the Red Arrows, the corridor is the original picture of every team there's ever been. And that there's no two ways about it. You feel those eyes on you as you walk down that corridor. These guys have done it, they've made it. Do not be the first team that hasn't. So it is a high pressure environment, and so every now and then you got to let go. So there's been some fairly sporty nights out, as you can imagine, and we're very lucky to have gone to some great parts of the world and found some fun locations. But outside of the what I'm alluding to in terms of going to bars and just letting your hair down a little bit before, when I had some, we had some great opportunities on that last tour, to go down and go out and see Niagara Falls on the ground, for example, and go and see the new One World Trade Center in New York. And, if there's an opportunity, I think some of the guys went and saw the Golden Gate Bridge in San Francisco. So the job takes you all over the world with opportunity to enjoy the places you see just as much as playing around in their airspace.
Yeah, I'm sure. And I'd heard from one of the team members about the fining system. So
yes, It's I mean, it's the quickest way to get better at something. If you're going to speed and then get fined for it, if you're going to park randomly in the high street and get fined for it, guess what? You stop speeding and you start finding a parking spot. So, the quickest way to get better at something is to fine you. So, the Red Arrows have a fining system. The exec, which I was in my final year, it totes it up as you go through all the debriefs. So an SOP could be 50p. If you said the wrong thing at the wrong time, or you executed the wrong move, or the wrong smoke, all sorts of things. If you're a minute late or over for any event, it's £1 a minute you're late. So if you turn up 5 minutes late, it's £5 in the pot. If it's for a function with your wife and you turn up 10 minutes late, that's 20 quid, tenner each. So it's a fairly aggressive. It gets capped. It actually gets capped at quite a lot. I'm not going to say the cap because it is eye-watering at times. But guess what? When you're getting fined for not being good enough or not being sharp enough in the air, you get pretty good pretty quickly. And you know what? It's all, at the end of the day, it's all good banter, because that goes into a pot. That might buy the first beer down route, or that might buy the first dinner at a nice restaurant if you're somewhere else in the world. It all goes to the entertainment of the overall team. And actually, when you find people, that is also at the entertainment of your other team members normally as well, because it's normally some heinous thing that you've done that everyone revels in your failure for a moment and makes you pay for it.
I'm sure
you get good fast. You get good fast when you put in £5-10 a week into a pot, I can tell you.
And I'm sure you had lots of cash staying in your pockets. Not going out of your pockets. So you spent 3 years on the team, is that right, Dan? 2017 to 2020.
Yeah, so I turned up the end of 2016, just as the team were heading eastbound. We joined the team in India just as a spare pilot. And again, as I say, just to be exposed to the stresses and strains and what's expected of a team pilot before you actually get in the seat. So we did a bit just on the coattails of the team, who were doing an awesome job in India and down to Southeast Asia. And just before we got to Zhuhai, I think it was, in China, it was at the time Chris Linden-Smith and Toby Keeley, who were the other two guys I joined with. We hot-footed it back to the UK, where we were trained by 100 Squadron to fly the Hawk, and we were up there to borrow their airplanes. And Chris actually taught us to do some wing overs and some basic formation flying, so that when Monty, who was the Red One at the time, came back, then we were able to get on with our workup. So we started our workup. I think it might have even been January 2017, and awesome years. 17, 6 week, the end of 17 season, 6 week tour of the Middle East. 2018, 100th anniversary of the Royal Air Force. I mean, the 100 aircraft fly past down the Mall. And then 2019, three and a bit months touring North America. I mean, and this is when I say fate's answer, had I been successful straight off the bat and got in 2 seasons previously when I first applied, those 3 amazing years consecutively would never have happened. So, you just got to roll with the punches and just keep going for what you want, because it'll work out. And my goodness, if I could have picked 3 years over recent times, they'd be the 3 years I'd fly.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm sure it's something that you are trained not to do and would rather not do it in the cockpit. But did you get the chance to just take a quick squint out the window when you went down the Mall?
Yeah. You'd be lying if you didn't. But I'm talking, you're looking out the side of your eye, because you'll see. We always talk about it. There's nothing worse than when you see a picture online after, and everyone's wings are flat and yours is even, and yours is just a touch bank, left wing or right wing low, and you just think. And do you know what? Even if you weren't looking out the window, you could just hit a thermal at the wrong time or whatever when that picture's taken. But you just wouldn't sleep that night if you looked out the window and the picture that was on the Times, the front page of the Times for the whatever it may be the next day, and yours was a touch right wing low, and it's because you were just having a quick peek at Hyde Park. So you have a little scan out the side, because there's nothing more phenomenal than flying through London in the team at those heights over those buildings, streaming out red, white, and blue smoke. But the pleasure actually comes looking back at the stills and the videos, knowing you did a good job, as opposed to seeing that you're level with the London eye. That is fantastic. I'm not going to lie.
Yeah, I'm sure that's cool. Yeah, absolutely. So all good things come to an end, and I guess one of the things when you're in the Air Force is that there's a structure and there's a start point and an end point, and you knew that was coming up at the end of 2019. I assume it was the end of the 2019 season. And what decision process was going on in your head, Dan, in terms of, do I stay, do I go? Did you want to go? Had you made the plan? How did you transition story?
To be completely honest with you, I was planning on staying. There was the option to go back to the Typhoon, which would have been fantastic. I had found myself, mid-30s. I spent 16 years in the service, mainly living up north, so Lincolnshire or Scotland. My family live in Surrey, and I just thought, look, and I was probably looking at that point, I was starting to think maybe, just for me, as rewarding as a career is in the Royal Air Force, and the guys that stayed in, there's some amazing guys from my generation I know who'll be fantastic leaders who will one day lead the service completely, which is awesome. And the people behind need to join and go for it for their whole career. So it's quite hard, having been in a PR role really with the Reds, to say, and then I left. And it wasn't. I didn't leave because I was disgruntled with anything. I'd planned to stay in. My decision was to have moved away from the Typhoon Force based off the time of my life and the location of the country I wanted to live in. I was starting to think that actually maybe at my option point of 40 to lead the service was probably going to be the way I was going to go. So how was I going to make myself more attractive to employers on the outside? And so I made the decision that actually maybe flying multi-engine airplanes for 5 years would mean that if I left at 40, 41, having done a full 20-year service, that actually, or 21-year service, that actually maybe the likes of British Airways, the Virgins, or whoever might be inclined to let me fly their bigger jets had I been a transport pilot in the Air Force. So I had managed to get myself into a position where that was going to happen, and I was going to go off and do multi-engine flying training. But an opportunity came up that I couldn't turn down for where I was, and what I was going to go do for 5 years was leading me to a position that was presenting itself to me now. And I just took a life decision, rightly or wrongly. I feel rightly at the moment. When in 30 years, when it all plays out, when you look back and you think, if, buts and maybes, but at the moment it feels like it was the right decision. I took an opportunity, and I now have joined another fantastic organization, working with a small group. So there's only 4 pilots on this airplane flying, all ex-military. So there's that kind of, it feels like there's still that camaraderie and that kind of small squadron thing attached to it, which I think is fantastic. I mean, that was, if you wanted to leave, that was what you'd leave for. And we fly a beautiful airplane that flies around at high 40s, going 9 miles a minute across the world to either around Europe, but I'm doing a transatlantic flight on Saturday, so it does short haul, long haul, ultra long haul. It's everything that if you're going to leave, you wanted to do, and it just meant I can have a bit more time to do other things that I've been thinking about doing for a while, whilst living in the part of the country that I've wanted to live in. But that was purely my decision.
Yeah, well, and I suppose this type of flying, plenty of our listeners and viewers will be familiar with this type of aviation, and I guess there's, to an extent, a little bit more control you've got over your destiny. There's some guaranteed chunks of time you get at home. I guess, having said that, though, obviously you have to make yourself available for the organisation that you're flying for. But I mean, in terms of that work-life balance, you know, I'm sure you dearly miss the flying you had in the Royal Air Force. But how does that work? How's that work-life balance beginning to play out for you? I know it's only been a year or so, but you know, were there any parallels there at all?
How is it? So, I mean, if I was, you'd stay in the Red Arrows forever, but that's not an option. But if I was to compare it to that, 15 flights a week, I think I've flown once in the last 12 weeks. But that's just due to COVID and the times of the rest of it. So, what is different is that, squadrons need running, they need manning. They've got, being a pilot in the Air Force is not, you don't turn up, strap yourself into an airplane and fly. You're an officer. So you've got other duties to carry out. You've got other, responsibilities and other things you need to be doing if you want to be successful in your career, but also if you want to be better as a tactician, if you want to be better as an overall pilot. There's a lot to be doing there, and so you would, it's not a you turn up and fly. You go to work 5 days a week or more if you're deployed, and where you go. Whereas what I now have is the ability to work from home. I still have to do those. There are still elements of that, secondary duties, we call them in the Air Force, or this thing doesn't run itself, but we're all connected by iPads now, and you can do this from different locations. So, I can be at home. I can wake up at home and, make plans to see people during the week, and knowing that actually I'm not going to go away for another week. And so that's the element that I'm enjoying the most is controlling my personal time and being at home whilst I can control it. But, I hope there's people in the Air Force who are watching this. I'm sure there will be. And it's something that I've said to a few guys who've left now, going, it's the grass is always greener, isn't it? And I've had a few people look over and say, how'd you end up there? But I've been out just over, it's come up to a year now, actually. So officially June, but I left the Reds in November last year. So, and that was my last, I'd say a real job I held in the Central Flying School whilst the process of leaving the Air Force happened.
Yeah.
But yeah, I would just say to the guys, maybe think about it, don't leave unless it worked for you. It works for me, which is great, but I think I'd find it difficult if I didn't have the purpose or the job that I left for. So yeah. What I'm trying to say is, there are sometimes in your service career you think, maybe I've had enough, but I would say don't leave for leaving's sake, because it is a great organization. It protects you in many areas that you don't know are there. It gives you opportunities that you probably after 16, 17 years take for granted, but it's a great organization and one that I'm very proud to be a part of. And had it not been for this exact opportunity, I wouldn't have left. Yeah,
sure. And I think it is true. I mean, fortune favors the brave, isn't it? You've got to have that. And I think you make your own luck, don't you, as well? I mean, you've got to have that a strategy in place. You've got to have some sort of plan, and then luck will come and find you. And it's just so great to see you transition into, a new career, albeit flying. It's different in every other way. That's very rewarding. And I'm sure you'll have many years ahead. And it's been really great talking to you, Dan. And
thank you.
You're a year into this new job with TAG Aviation, and what an awesome jet! From one iconic machine to another.
I've been very lucky. If I was to probably write down the airplanes I wanted to fly, put them in an envelope, and you pulled it out, I'm pretty sure a couple of years ago that the airplanes that I've flown will all be on that list. So I've been blessed, that's for sure.
Yeah. Well, we're drawing to the end, and I've got some questions here, Dan, inevitably, because of what you've been up to in your career. So I'm going to go back to the Typhoon. And there's a question. There's a question here. It says, what's the highest you've ever been in the Typhoon, and have you ever had a drag race? Now, I'm assuming that means with another type of jet or something.
So the highest of the Typhoon is 55,000 feet. So you can just about start to see the curvature of the Earth when you're up there. You don't tend to do it that often in the UK. Because you do need a bit of a run up to get up there. You need to manage your speed quite well. It's quite easy to run out of energy before you get there. But if you manage your speed quite well and look after as I say, you manage the energy well, you'll get up there without a problem. So it happens every now and then in the UK. It's quite rare to be up there, but normally when you're down in the Falkland Islands, we've got some airplanes deployed down there, and you used to go down and do a number of weeks. A year or every 2 years down there. So you used to get up to 55,000 feet, and when you're up there, it's say curvature of the Earth, you'd roll upside down. I remember rolling upside down over the Falkland Islands, and it looked like the page in an encyclopedia almost. It just You realize you're pretty high when you're up there, and you can take the jet as well. Just to add on to that, to 1.8, so Mach 1.8. So you're doing 18 miles a minute at 55,000 feet, looking up at the world, and you just think that's pretty cool. Yeah, so that was great. And for legal reasons, I probably wouldn't call it a drag race, but there have been times where we've needed to check out the performance of each aircraft. Wings alongside each other over the North Sea, and you start off at about 200 knots and plug the burners in and see who gets to 600 first. But yeah, that was purely for operational purposes.
Yeah, of course. I've got a question here. I can remember it, but I can't find the person's name because there's so many questions coming in here. Oh, here we go. From Peter Anker, he says, is there any pressure being the executive officer on the Red Arrows?
Peter, great question. Yeah, there is. There's no two ways about it. It's a coveted position, one that I was very proud to be asked to do. And yeah, there is pressure there because you sometimes have to toe a line between Red One and the team. And there might be some times where you have to speak to the guys in a quite guided fashion. And did I always get that right? No. Would I do things differently in some areas? Yes. But you are the holder of standards at times, away from Red One being in the briefing room. You would go and speak to the team, say, look, these are probably some of the views. I mean, don't get me wrong, Red One runs the show and he'll be there telling the guys what they're doing, but quite often he might come to you first or ask your opinion or something, and maybe you canvass opinion from the team. In the debriefs, you are almost the holder of the standards I mentioned before. You'd have to sometimes awkwardly stop people and say, was that because of this? Maybe if they hadn't seen something or they're adamant something hadn't happened, you sometimes had to, back yourself and say, no, I think you're wrong, which is always a bit awkward, especially in such a small team. And and sometimes you would have to ask Red One some awkward questions on behalf of the team, or your beliefs if you think maybe it wasn't the best for everyone. And that was incredibly rare, don't get me wrong. But yeah, there were some pressures. Yeah, you're expected to do a fairly busy job and do it well.
Yeah, quite. The next question here is from Jude Mel, and she says, Dan, if you had the chance to fly anything you could, what would you fly and why?
That's so hard, isn't it? Spitfire, because it's the most beautiful aircraft ever. The SR-71 Blackbird, because you could go Mach 3, or Concorde, because it was just probably the most iconic airliner ever. So, well, apart from the jumper, but yeah. So I can't give you a straight answer there. But I'll tell you what, I'll take Concorde. I'll take Concorde out of those three.
That's a good answer. Yeah. Good answer. Back to the Red Arrows. This is a good one. I guess this is probably from a team perspective. How quickly would you lose currency if not display flying or practice display flying? So I guess muscle memory or
in terms of personal performance, you wouldn't want to see me try anything now, I guess. But there are actual limits in the rules about if you haven't done a certain discipline in so many amount of days or so many amount of weeks, and you would have to break the shape down, build it back up again. So it's the risk level of the displays is, as you can imagine, scrutinized at the highest levels with a fine tooth comb. So there's a recency or a currency put to everything, even just individual flying. The guys will break down every couple of weeks and just go off by themselves. So if you ever near Scampton, or a lot of people I see posting things where they've screen grabbed, flight radar 24, and there's the odd airplane here and there, that's because that pilot is just simply off to practice stalling, or to practice landing, or to practice an instrument approach at another airfield. So everything has a currency and a recurrency attached to it. But in terms of motor skill, when I'm trying to think back, maybe if you didn't, had you not flown well within the limits, but maybe after about 2 weeks, you'd be a bit nervous. But it's one of those things. It's drilled into you so much. You do a repetitive skill over and over again so many times that it's like, I'm not going to say riding a bike, because it's not that simple. But you have to blow the cobwebs out, but they get blown out pretty quickly. It all comes flooding back.
Yeah, sure.
I'd say about 2 weeks.
Yeah. I've got two more questions here, Dan. This is an awesome one, and it's a really simple one. What was your best ever display?
For best ever display.
Now, I'm not sure if they mean because you just aced it or because of the
Oh,
site.
that didn't exist. So let's go. I always used to love Western-super-Mare because you used to get a onshore breeze and there wasn't any topography to the southwest. All very geeky chat, I know, but it just meant the air was always super smooth there. So the team always performed really well at Western-super-Mare. Riat was awesome. And if I was to take any, I'll take my last ever display, Huntington Beach on the west coast of California. A beautiful day. We did a mixed formation fly past with the Thunderbirds. And then, we smashed out a display in front of a lot of people. I don't want to quote it, but a high number of people there. And there we were off the west coast here, Los Angeles just to the north, this beautiful Californian beach. And a lot of people stood on the sand there watching us do our thing. Yeah, Huntington Beach 2019.
What a memory. So here we go then. This is probably quite a nice question to end on, actually. What did it feel like to fly your first ever Red Arrows display?
Oh, nervous anything. I remember we flew from, we'd been in Tanagra, which is the Greek Air Force base just north of Athens, where we'd been training for our spring training. And we'd flown back via, I think it was France, into Exeter. And we went from Exeter straight into the Torbay Air Show. And it was very odd. It was you'd spent 7 months in a structured environment. Everything was fine. You knew what you were doing, but this is the first unknown again. So after 7 months of all these unknowns becoming known, well, now it's actually a show. And the little nav route that you do before it, even though you did little nav routes to displays, it wasn't quite like getting airborne out of Exeter and flying for 15 minutes through the south of the UK at low level. So that was distracting in a way. And then running into all your emotions, your heart's racing. I was on the edge of tears, almost thinking, "What on earth?" And you're doing your job, going, "Do not again. Do not be the one that messes up." I was on Monty's left wing as Red 3, running in, and I remember just again taking a quick peek out the front, just out the corner of my eye, and seeing the buildings of Torbay, but essentially the northern side, knowing that on the other side there was a beach full of people waiting for you, and they didn't quite know where you were. And just exhilarating. And I'll never forget, Toby Keeley was 2. He screamed a little G up, and the boss shouted "smoke on go," and that was it. And it was just awesome. Exhilarating. Yeah.
Oh, what a lovely way to end, Dan. Yeah. Thank you so much for giving up your evening, particularly as you're about to head off and leave the family for a trip for the day job. It's been absolutely brilliant and really entertaining, and there's a lot of people that have been commenting. And what a way to end our Inspirability Talks at the end of 2020. A turbulent year, but I think Airability's managed to pull it off again. Dan, thank you ever so much once again.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for everyone who's in your charity, and thank you for everyone who supports your charity. You guys, I've seen you over and over again with my time and team, and you make such a difference to people. So thank you for everyone's efforts who does anything for Airability, and thank you for having me.
Oh, it's kind words, Dan. Thanks very much, and have a happy Christmas.
All the best. Thank you, everyone. Have a good night.
Cheers, Dan. Well, there you go. What a great guy, and what a fun way to end our Inspirability Talks. We've learned a lot this evening, how the Red Arrows find each other, and what it's like to be on a flight test squadron for the Typhoon. Some really great insights there from Dan, and we wish Dan all the best for his trip away from home with his new day job. So it just leaves for me to say thank you for tuning in. Don't forget the Just Giving page. Donate as much or as little as you can. Airability is going to be closed over Christmas, so if you're flying, then get that in before the 23rd of December, and we reopen again on the 3rd of January, I believe. But check the website for more details on that. We've got the Armchair Air Show coming up at the beginning of March next year, so there's some really interesting stuff that we're working on right now to bring another afternoon of entertainment to your screens. But it just leaves me to say thank you very much, everybody. Have a wonderful Christmas and a happy new year, and we'll see you in 2021. Thanks very much.